You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 27th of February 2026 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Live from London, this is The Globalist with me, Emma Nelson. A very warm welcome to today's programme. Coming up, after a day of talks in Geneva, what progress has been made between the US and Iran? We'll examine the latest effort to dial down tensions. Also ahead in the next 60 minutes, Japan pledges to beef up its front line, with missiles sent to the westernmost island near Taiwan. We'll ask if the message to China could be any clearer. Our newspaper review will come from our Paris bureau, and
we learned that the residents of one swish neighbourhood of Mumbai are approaching the end of their wits and or tethers as a consequence of local authorities having had what may well be the worst idea in all of human history.
Andrew Mueller will tell us what we learned this week, plus the fashion news too. That's all coming up on The Globalist, live from London. First, a quick look at some of the other stories we're following today. Pakistan has bombed Taliban targets in Kabul and other Afghan cities in a sharp escalation of the long-running border dispute. The streaming platform Netflix has abandoned bidding for the media company Warner Brothers Discovery, clearing the way for a rival offer from Paramount. And the Prime Minister of Japan, Sanae Takaichi, has told Parliament she's opposed to altering male-only succession in the imperial family. She says she doesn't want a woman succeeding to the chrysanthemum throne. Stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on these stories. But first, the messages from negotiations involving the US and Iran grew more and more positive as yesterday afternoon and evening went on. An immediate agreement is within reach, suggested a prominent advisor to Iran's supreme leader. But all the while, the military presence of America's firepower continued to build. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest aircraft carrier, left Crete for the Middle East. Well, I'm joined now by Paul Waldie, who's a Europe correspondent at the Globe and Mail. Good morning. Welcome back, Paul.
Hi, good morning.
Good to have you with us. Right, let's have a look at what happened yesterday. So there were 3 rounds of talks within one day. They went into the good part of the evening, and depending on how you read it, it went really well, or there was no deal.
Well, exactly. It doesn't sound like there was any major breakthrough. The Iranians are kind of hailing this as, a lot of progress was made. The Omanis, who kind of are the mediators, have also said it was a good round of discussions. But we haven't really heard a lot from the White House or from Washington about how they view this. So it still remains to be seen whether or not Trump is going to go ahead with these threats to carry out some kind of military strike. But for now, anyway, they're still talking. They plan another round of meetings next week, which will be important because this round will include more representatives from the International Atomic Energy Agency, and those are the people who would monitor any kind of an agreement. So I guess there's a sense that maybe they're getting down to some kind of details on an agreement, but still it looks like there's some pretty important roadblocks that remain.
Indeed. I mean, just talking about looking ahead to Vienna already, the Omani foreign minister has said that yesterday's talks yielded significant progress, and that discussions on a technical level resume in Vienna next week. This is where the difficult part starts, doesn't it? But does that mean that some principles may well have been established?
I mean, it's so hard to say because, the Iranians have complained, probably rightfully so, that they're not really clear on what Washington or Trump wants out of these discussions. If they want to keep the focus strictly on the nuclear program, whether or not Iran will ever be able to develop or enrich any uranium ever, whether or not their stockpile of uranium that they have on hand should be sent out of the country, depleted in some fashion. They're prepared to talk about all of those kinds of things. But they want a reduction of sanctions, on the other hand, in response to anything they agree to. What they're concerned about is that Trump is throwing in a bunch of other issues. He wants to stop them from developing a long-range missile. He wants to stop them from funding organizations or groups in the Middle East, such as Hamas and others. So it's not really clear. And, Trump is also mused about regime change in Iran. So I think the Iranians want to keep the focus on the nuclear program, and they're not quite sure where the White House is going. So until we really get a clear sense about how Washington views all of this, it may just be a bunch of discussions, technical discussions on something that Washington's not going to agree to anyway.
I mean, is there a fear that Donald Trump actually himself isn't 100% sure what he wants?
I think there's always a fear that Donald Trump isn't quite sure what he wants on any given day. And that's the real worry. I mean, this whole issue he raised in the State of the Union address earlier this week about Iran having the capability to develop missiles that would hit the U.S., most intelligence observers say that's just not the case. They've never had that capability. They don't have it now, and they're a long way from developing that. They're even a long way from developing any kind of a nuclear weapon, given the strikes that the Washington and Israel carried out last year on the 3 nuclear, underground nuclear sites that Iran has. So, I mean, everything is a long way off now, and it's really not clear what exactly Trump wants out of this.
There is that view as well from Tehran that some parts of the Iranian regime still think that the sticking point here is that Iran's nuclear facilities need to be destroyed permanently for any deal to be reached. And this is something that there are big swathes of the regime which are saying that's absolutely never going to happen. I think we've had the head of the Iranian Government Information Council saying enrichment will continue with accordance with needs.
Right. And I think what Iran has argued for a long time, and in fact, this was part of the agreement that was struck during the Obama administration, was they were prepared to sort of stop all enrichment for a few years, but keep a tiny amount of enrichment for medical purposes for civilian use. Now, that's been their stated position for a while. That was what the original agreement called for, that was actually being monitored. But that doesn't seem to be good enough, we don't think, for Trump. He wants a complete 100% eradication of the program. And he wants Iran to ship out the stockpile of uranium, of enriched uranium it has on hand. He wants that either diluted or taken out of the country. And that, again, is something the Iranians are against. So it really comes down to an issue of, will Trump be prepared to allow Iran to have any enrichment program at all? Or is he going to stick to this 100% position?
And if, for example, this does not happen, that the 100% requirement is not met, Iran does keep its enrichment program. How does the United States go about actually launching a military offensive on Iran, given the fact that, OK, last year we had the targeting of very specific nuclear facilities in Iran in a what seemed to be sort of a reasonably contained operation. But we have Democrats in the US now saying, in the House, saying that were Donald Trump to want to launch military action against Iran, they need to force a vote on it.
Yeah, and I think there's a vote coming up on this that could really tie Trump's hands to some degree. So he really only has, some are saying, a window of maybe up to this weekend to do any kind of a strike. But there is so much uncertainty about what he and maybe Israel would hit in Iran. Would it be a big strike? Would it be limited? What would the targets be? And what would be the point of it? I mean, they launched the attacks last June. Trump claimed he obliterated their whole nuclear program. So what is it they're going after this time? And if Trump's stated goal is regime change, how does he go about that by launching missiles? I mean, does that involve sending troops in? We've seen some comments from J.D. Vance saying there's no way the U.S. would get involved in some kind of prolonged conflict in the Middle East. So we have that. So that seems to indicate some kind of a limited response. But given the amount of firepower Trump has assembled off the coast of Iran and in the region, you have to wonder how he's going to find a way out of this that doesn't involve using some of that.
You mentioned Israel and the region, and the news that's broken overnight is that Israel has struck Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. This is complicating things because there are fears, aren't there, about what Hezbollah might do if the United States attacks its sponsor, Iran. The potential for drawing so many other players into this conflict would be huge.
Well, exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people are worried about. And I think even some of the military officers in the U.S. are worried about this as well. What would Iran's response be? What would Hezbollah's response, Hamas's response, and others be? Now, obviously, Iran is in a much more weakened position than it has been in a very long time, as are its allies across the region. So it's not clear exactly what kind of strikes they could carry out or whether or not Iran would want to if it was a limited strike on behalf of the U.S. But nonetheless, that's a real concern. And of course, now you have the whole Pakistan border situation going on, that the whole area is becoming so much inflamed that you really have to wonder how Trump finds a way out of this diplomatically and what will work, what will satisfy the Iranians right now as well.
And also looking at your position as a Europe correspondent for the Globe and Mail, looking at what Europe's reaction could be to any action in Iran, because Europe has played a very, very big part in striking nuclear agreements with Iran in the past. Also, as a Canadian, you have that, the observation from over the border as to what America is doing in terms of flexing its military muscle.
Well, exactly. And I mean, I think, if you go back again to that Obama agreement, the Europeans were part of that. The Europeans were keen to be part of the monitoring effort to help try and track this program. But Trump threw that out the window in his first term in office. And now he's back to trying to renegotiate that on his own, sort of a U.S. only approach, maybe with Israel as well. And I think for Europe, for Canada, for other countries, that's a bit concerning that the U.S. has kind of abandoned any kind of multinational effort and is really going it alone here and maybe launching the world into what could be a pretty dramatic military conflict. It could, affect not only obviously the lives of people in Iran, but the price of oil, the economy, all kinds of different things. So, yeah, there's fallout for this all over the world.
Paul Waldie, Europe correspondent at the Globe and Mail. Thank you so much for joining us on the line. You're listening to The Globalist. We head to Paris now for today's newspaper review. Heading to Paris's Studio 5 is Francis Collins, foreign news correspondent for the BBC, Associated Press, and lots more. Good morning, Francis. How's Paris looking today?
It's looking beautiful. I think the last time I came to the studio, it was equally beautiful because it was snow and ice, and now we have the air of spring in Paris.
Absolutely. So suddenly everything changes in Paris, right? So the grey lid of the Tupperware box that we've been sealed in for months and months and months suddenly springs open.
Exactly. We had 2 sunny days, beautiful, 17, 18 degrees. I was out walking in a forest near where I live. It was wonderful.
And your voice sounds actually energised and lifted because of it. I'm so glad to hear it. Right, let's press on with the papers. What have you found?
Well, concern, obviously, internationally here as well regarding what's going on between Pakistan and Afghanistan, because as you've been reporting, there have been attacks overnight on Afghanistan. Pakistan's position on this is that there's been too much cross-border terrorism, too many attacks, suicide attacks, notably coming inside Pakistan, and they say they're aimed at clearing out what they call safe havens in the border areas. So we understand there's been strikes on Kabul and Kandahar province and Paktika, also one of the border areas. And this is something you may recall flared up a few months ago, and there's been ongoing peace talks, which I think have been led mainly by Turkey and Qatar, mediating a rather uncomfortable ceasefire, which now seems to have stopped. It's in no one's interest for this to continue, but slightly concerning quotes from the Pakistan Defence Minister, Khawaja Mohammad Asif. He calls the Taliban a proxy for India. So what we don't want to see and what nobody wants to see is any sort of escalation that does involve other players in the region, notably India, because, of course, we've had issues in the past between Pakistan and India for well-documented reasons. He talks of open war, but they say they're targeting the Taliban headquarters, ammunition depots, posts on the border, and stopping these cross-border attacks that have been ongoing in the last few months. Indeed.
Open war is the headline that has been seized by absolutely everybody else. Right, let's move to French news. Marine Le Pen from the far-right party, I can't remember what used to be the Front National. My mind's gone a complete blank. What is it now?
It's the National Rally, effectively.
Thank you. Yes, that's it, Rassemblement National.
Indeed.
Marine Le Pen's been giving interviews.
She has. Interesting character. Always when she speaks, whether you like her or loathe her, and she does divide opinion, of course, in France. She's worth listening to. Interview with BFM TV this week. Of course, she wants to run for the presidency next year for the 4th time, but currently barred. So she was talking about that. You may recall she was convicted last year of embezzling EU funds that she says she was calling an anti-democratic decision last year when she was convicted. This is money coming from the EU to her party, which was being spun off in directions it shouldn't have been. She's now mellowed a little bit on her anti-democratic stance, saying that if she doesn't win her appeal, which is in July, and gets that bar from running for public office lifted, then she won't be running for the president. She said it's impossible to be campaigning with an electronic bracelet. I mean, I have to say there's something quite admirable about a country and a system that doesn't really mind going after anyone who's at the top as well as at the bottom. If you think that Nicolas Sarkozy has had his own issues over the last few years and knows all about wearing electronic bracelets, Marine Le Pen talking about it quite openly. She's had her appeal, but the verdict is going to be delivered, as I say, on about the 7th of July, and that's going to determine her political future. And of course, if she doesn't run, it's going to be Jordan Bardella, who is her protege. She says he's an independent mind. He'll do exactly what he wants to do. She'll be there to offer the advice and experience she's built up, but she won't be controlling him as a puppet. And in the polls, he is popular. So, that strength to his elbow. Next year could be very interesting when it comes to the presidential elections.
The difficulty is that the minute she says, I mean, this is getting widespread coverage. I think the Times of London has picked up on it and she is denying that she would pull the strings, that she won't be the puppet master. Jordan Bardella is a free man. The minute you say that places it within a frame of, well, everybody will be looking at her to see what she is doing.
Yeah, and she says she'll take whatever role is offered to her. She will accept positions within the government, if indeed they make up the government, and that's far from conclusive at the moment. But he is young. He's only 30 years old. He is someone who's come up under her auspices, let's say. So I think it's fair for a beady eye to be cast on the influence she does have over the candidate next year in the election. And of course, attention is not only on him and on her, but also on the emergence as yet, if there is going to be one, of someone of a centrist nature, because of course Macron won't be running again. So is there a centrist vote up for grabs, or is it going to go right or left? Who knows? Now
I know you want to plunge us into France's cultural life. We had the Césars last night, but also there's a bigger thing at the moment that lots of countries, including the United Kingdom and dare I say, plenty of other nations are just gently poaching the top talent from America as senior actors and senior figures are finding themselves disillusioned with the Trump administration.
Yeah, this is something which the French, I do notice the French press does tend to deal with quite a lot, because of course it's a lot of cachet for French cinema. Not that it necessarily needs that, but they do love it when people come here and extol the virtues. We've got a history of Americans coming and extolling the virtues of Paris, dating back to Josephine Baker, Hemingway, for example. Angélique Jolie was here recently saying that in France it's enriching as an artist and as a woman to be in France. I feel more of myself comes out here. Others who've been here, Timothy Chalamet, who does speak French, although friends of mine say that his French is a little bit odd in certain areas. But
it's better than most Hollywood actors. I think we have to give him that.
Well, indeed, with a French father, it is. He chats away about his love for Saint-Étienne, the football team, and life in France. But other people have made Paris their home. Wes Anderson, Natalie Portman, Sofia Coppola. Jude Law lives in France, I think, for half the year. Most famously, recently, and controversially, you could argue, George Clooney is applying for citizenship. And I think the rather exacting language test won't be applied to George Clooney. He says he's learning French, but I don't think he'll be taking the test to get his citizenship. So is there a cultural exodus? An article in Le Monde is saying Paris is turning into Frollywood, a refuge for American actors, and it cites several auteur films being made in France, set for release in a few months' time. They give that impression. Matt Dillon is in a film called La Cri de Gare, The Fence. Woody Harrelson and Kristen Stewart are appearing in another film. Mark Ruffalo is in a thriller by Bertrand Bonello. So, yes, is it a home for French actors? Probably not more than it has been in the past, but it's something that Le Monde wants to talk about. And of course, it fits into the narrative of standing up against Trump, which is often behind a lot of articles in the French press.
I honestly don't think more Hollywood names have been squeezed into one item in all my days on Monocle Radio. Well, I think that's a record, Francis. Well done. Okay. We're in with both feet. Let's talk about the Césars. Jim Carrey received an honorary award, and guess what? He did it in French as well. Is this suddenly becoming a thing that everybody should speak French? Because I think Jodie Foster speaks French. Her French is exquisite. But the fact is that in order to appear cultured, you need to speak French.
Well, I think it's a sign of respect as well. I mean, Jim Carrey doesn't live here, but he's getting the main award, the Lifetime Achievement Award, as it were. So it was a little laboured, the bit I saw, and he made jokes about how bad his French was, but good on him for turning up and speaking. I saw Jarvis Cocker recently speaking French as well, the musician from Pulp. He lives here, and he's got good French, but with a Mancunian accent, which is always quite odd to hear. So Jim Carrey, yeah, he was honoured. The host, Benjamin Laverne, he donned a yellow suit and did a tribute to Jim Carrey's role in The Mask. And he cracked a few jokes as well. Did Laverne? Made a joke about the Epstein files, which didn't go down too well. He said, "It's a beautiful room tonight, many familiar faces. I must say, for some of you, a refreshing change of pace to be sitting in a list of nominees where the other names aren't redacted by the FBI."
Oof. Okay, so there we go. So we have this idea that France has a cultural sort of cachet to it. Speaking French is a sign of respect, and yet they can still pull those punches. There were some sort of old school moments, though, weren't there? Because Brigitte Bardot had her tribute, which was obviously rather difficult, given the fact that, yes, having been the ultimate sex kitten in the late 1950s and 60s, her politics moved well. But there was also an award for the Richard Linklater film Nouvelle Vague.
Yeah, black and white film about the shooting of the Jean-Luc Godard classic Breathless. So that went down well, of course. The Attachment by Corinne Tadiot won the César for the best film. Leah Drucker for File 137 was best actress, and Laurent Lafitte for The Richest Woman in the World was the best actor. Also worth noting, record female representation. Years of criticism, not just at the Césars, but also at the BAFTAs and at the Oscars regarding gender parity. Women represented 43% of nominees this year, which is a record. And notably, Elise Fisher, the first woman in the history of the Césars to win the Best Visual Effect for The Great Arch. Also, politics coming into it. I mean, you could never have an award ceremony without it. We would be surprised if there was nothing. But Isabelle Adjani used her time on stage to call for a standing ovation from the men in the room to honour women victims of sexual assault and also the women of Iran.
Okay. Thank you so much. Francis Collins coming to us from Studio 5 in Paris. Thank you so much for bringing us the paper review. You're listening to Monocle Radio.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS's Chief Investment Office Houseview, we're focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals, so you get the big picture broken down into thought-provoking insights. Delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts. UBS. Banking is our craft.
It's 16:23 in Akita, Japan, 7:23 here in London. Now, Japan is to deploy missiles to an island right on the border with Taiwan, sending perhaps Tokyo's strongest message yet to Beijing about its priorities when it comes to security. The island of Yonaguni, which is less than 70 miles from Taiwan's eastern coast, is far closer to Taipei than to Tokyo and has long been seen as a possible front line in any conflict between China and Taiwan. By 2031, it will station surface-to-air missiles. Well, I'm joined by Yu Hua Chen, who's a assistant professor at Akita International University in Japan. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Why has Japan decided to do this?
I think this is a part of a long-term strategic transformation of Japan rather than a very short-term political gesture of Japan toward China.
So,
the thing is,
yes, do carry on.
Right. The thing is, this plan, for much of the Cold War era, Japan's defense posture was always concentrated on its northern region, Hokkaido, right? Pretty much reflect the threat from Russia. But around 2010, under the Prime Minister Yoshihiko Noda from the Democratic Party of Japan, Japan started to shift its strategic focus from the north to the southwest region, right, which consists a number of islands, right, including Amami, Oshima, Miyako Islands, Ishikashi Island, and right now Yonaguni Island. And the staff from Shinzo Abe and then Kishida government, we do see Japan start to deploy a number of missiles, from those islands from the east to the west until the Yonaguni Island. So I would say this is a very long-term strategic shift of Japan.
And indeed, I mean, what's been the reaction to this in Japan? Because to be so bold and to say that by 2031 there will be surface-to-air missiles at Yonaguni, which, as we've mentioned, is geographically so much closer to Taipei than it is to Tokyo. The Japanese accepted? Is the current mood in Japan that of accepting that the geopolitical tectonic plates are shifting?
I mean, this plan, as a matter of fact, was set back to 3 years ago, 2022, 2023. And that was why when Koizumi visited Yonaguni Island and saying our missile deployment has been in progress, right? It has been in progress for years. And part of the reason Japan want to deploy missiles, and by the way, the missile is a Type 3 missile, surface-to-air missile that is with defense character. And one of the main reasons Japanese government to do so is try to reflect the concern of Japanese citizens on those islands, because those Japanese citizens, they worry if there's any attack from China because of Taiwan or Senkaku Island issue, they might be at the first front of the Chinese attack. So deploying those defense missiles is very important because those Type 3 missiles can intercept the coming missiles from China or coming aircraft from China within a 50 kilometers range.
This is a very clear message being sent to China by the Japanese administration from Sanae Takaichi, whose opening few months were defined by a row that she'd managed to engage in with China.
Right, but as I mentioned earlier, this defense missile deployment has been on progress for more than a decade. This is a cross parties, cross government, and cross factions consensus, and it has been taking place for more than a decade. So I would say it's pretty much reflect the consensus of a Japanese political elite rather than Takaichi herself.
So finally, just on the long term, you mentioned the fact that this is all deeply strategic. Does this actually strengthen deterrence in the region, or do we have a situation where Taiwan would actually be more vulnerable?
I would say this missile defense development probably is less to do with Taiwan contingency, because this Type 3 missile is a very short-range missile, only cover airspace around 50 kilometers. But Yonaguni Island is about 100 kilometers away from Taiwan. So I would say this missile deployment is much more about Japan itself rather than the Taiwan contingency. But of course, the Chinese government try to use this as a reason, try to attack or try to accuse Japanese government being militarized the Taiwan Strait or those missile.
Yu Hua Chen, thank you so much for joining us on the line from Akita in Japan. Still to come on today's Globalist. Utterly beautiful stuff. Why Finland's flag carrier has decided that flying through the air isn't wondrous enough. It's decided to bring you a soundscape. Stay tuned. Now here's a quick look at some of the other stories we're keeping an eye on today. Pakistan has bombed Taliban targets in Kabul and other Afghan cities in a sharp escalation of the long-running border dispute between the two countries. Pakistan's defence minister says there are now a state of open war with Afghanistan. The streaming platform Netflix has abandoned bidding for the media company Warner Brothers Discovery. It clears the way for a rival offer from Paramount, who's valued the company at around $108 billion. The US financial tech firm Block says it's cutting more than 4,000 jobs, that's around half its workforce, because AI tools mean smaller teams can do more. The company's shares have risen by more than 20%. And the Prime Minister of Japan, Sanae Takaichi, has told Parliament she's opposed to altering male-only succession in the imperial family. She said she didn't want a woman succeeding to the chrysanthemum throne. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now, what was once a valuable strategic partnership between two of the Middle East's most prominent nations seems to be collapsing. The UAE and Saudi Arabia currently find themselves on different sides of violent conflicts in Yemen and in Sudan. They're often competing for the same economic spoils, and in recent months, things have soured quickly. I'm joined now by Inzamam Rashid, who's Monocle's Gulf correspondent. He joins me on the line now from Dubai, out and about. Inzi, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Emma.
Just explain to us why things are going wrong in particular. There's been a bit of a focus on it. We've talked about it before, but things are happening now that are really a sign that the deterioration is very prominent.
Yeah, it is very prominent indeed. And the rift between the UAE and Saudi Arabia has really escalated since the back end of last year. And it's a rift which is now incredibly public as well. So obviously the big issue has been Yemen, the UAE backing the Yemeni separatists, the Southern Transitional Council, the STC, where they launched a surprise offensive in southern Yemen, in the area of Hadramaut, a strategically vital and oil-rich region. As a result of that, Riyadh felt pretty betrayed. Riyadh, of course, supporting a united Yemen. They've accused Abu Dhabi of undermining the Saudi-led coalition against the Houthis, threatening its national security and buffer zone. And this then essentially marked a very rare direct clash between these two GCC heavyweights, shifting the dispute from a very quiet diplomatic friction to operational and military tension on the ground in Yemen. But the Yemen dispute isn't just local, it's about influence as well. This isn't just a fight that's occurring in Yemen, it's a contest over leadership of the Arab world. And when you've got two countries like the UAE and Saudi Arabia going at it head to head, it's a lot more than what's actually happening on the ground. This is about actually having ownership of the GCC. This is about leading the GCC as well. Dubai, the UAE, Abu Dhabi, they've done that for quite some time. Saudi Arabia now wants its moment and are really pushing to be a leader in this region, whether that's diplomatically, whether that's strategically, whether that's through business as well. And so what we're finding is that actually a lot of the tensions that are happening in a place like Yemen, which both of these countries have an involvement in, are now spilling out into other sectors as well.
And explain to us a little bit more about where these other sectors are becoming involved. Are we talking geographically, or are we talking the way that the whole economy and society works?
Well, it's having knock-on effects across so many different sectors. I mentioned a few initially. The media, to start off with, has played a huge role in all of this. We've seen specifically, Saudi-led media targeting the UAE and the UAE's role in what's been happening on the ground in Yemen. And they've done that specifically by allowing international media into Yemen, showing them around where the UAE may have been committing human rights violations within Yemen itself. For example, the Saudis allowed the BBC in to film and showed them, or helped them point cameras in the direction of potential human rights violations. In return, the UAE on the media front has been pretty quiet, but they've led a social media campaign through the voice of influential social media influencers, tweeting things or posting posts across social media networks to really demystify any of the reports coming out of Saudi Arabia. So we've seen this huge media battle from mainstream media here in the region through to social media. And then the other huge issue is business between the two countries. We just had the World Defence Show recently in Riyadh. There were meant to be 30 UAE defence entities that were meant to travel to Riyadh for the show. None of them traveled. And in fact, the main one, their stall in the middle of of the whole event hall was turned into a cafe, which was a bit of a kick in the teeth. So, and what we've also found as well, getting business visas for people from the UAE entering into Riyadh has been incredibly difficult as well. So business is having a huge knock-on effect.
Indy, final question. This does not exist in a vacuum. This dispute obviously has complications and consequences when it comes to other big areas of dispute and trouble in the Middle East. If America decides that it needs to mount some sort of military operation against Iran, what does that do for these two?
I think that's going to be the real test for these two countries. We've seen over the last few days, Egypt's President Sisi has personally engaged to kind of mediate between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. Bahrain also reportedly kind of engaging both of the capitals to calm their tensions, signaling concern. And that's because of potentially what could happen out here in the region. If Donald Trump does decide to strike Iran, and all the signals are pointing towards that, what will be incredibly important is to see whether the UAE and Saudi Arabia are singing from the same hymn sheet, whether they are actually in line together, whether they can actually support the same strategy that they want. Right now, Saudi Arabia are really pushing a narrative that the UAE is in lockstep with the Israelis. They are essentially supporting an attack on Iran, and the UAE is saying that Saudi Arabia is not doing enough to create peace and stability in the region. And so, if these two heavyweight nations in the GCC are at each other's throats if and when a strike happens on Iran, that will be a very, very testing time for the region.
Inzamam Rashid in Dubai, thank you so much for joining us on The Globalist. Just nudging 7:37 a.m. here in London. It's Friday, so here's what we learned.
We learned this week that the State of the Union is...
Our country is winning again. In fact, we're winning so much that we really don't know what to do about it. People are asking me, please, 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 Mr. President, we're winning too much. We can't take it anymore. We're not used to winning in our country. Until you came along, we're just always losing, but now we're winning too much.
Interminable. We learned that US President Donald Trump can correctly claim to have earned at least one honour, i.e. the title of deliverer of the longest State of the Union address on record, his 108 minutes at the lectern, easing past the 99 minutes put up by President Bill Clinton in 2000. Tempting to say shame there isn't a gold medal or gaudy trophy for this, but it's at least an even bet that by the time you hear this, there will be. Am I right? Anyway, we learned, greatly to our disappointment, if we're honest, we were kind of banking on the State of the Union to write this edition for us, that on this occasion Trump stuck mostly to the script. We did, however, get briefly excited by this, i.e. a caller to a programme on C-SPAN introducing himself as a voter dissatisfied with a recent Supreme Court judgment and identifying himself as John Barron, which listeners with a command of recent and stupid American history may recall was the alias President Trump adopted during the 1980s when he was pretending to be his own publicist, and who had a somewhat familiar tone to both his voice and his vocabulary.
Well, this is John Barron, and this is the worst decision you ever have in your life, practically. Jack's going to agree with me, right? But this is a terrible decision. And you have Hakeem Jeffries, he's a dope, and you have Chuck Schumer, who can't cook a cheeseburger. Of course these people are happy.
But we learned that C-SPAN was at pains to insist that the caller was not who viewers may very well have assumed it was, although we were at least reminded of the somewhat melancholy fact that Trump actually named his youngest and tallest child after his imaginary employee. So we learned that we would be compelled to search elsewhere for material, a quest that took us as far afield as India, where we did at least discover that we could employ the linking device of monotonous din droning on and on and on, far past the tolerance of the sane. For we learned that the residents of one swish neighbourhood of Mumbai are approaching the end of their wits and or tethers as a consequence of local authorities having had what may well be the worst idea in all of human history, i.e. engineering grooves into the seafront boulevard, imaginatively named Coastal Road, so that when vehicles drive over them at certain speeds, a tune is emitted. The specific tune being the one playing in the background now, i.e. Jai Ho, from the soundtrack of Slumdog Millionaire. Here is what that sounds like when rendered by Tata Wheel on asphalt. We learned that those within earshot are being subject to this racket more or less all goddamn day, every goddamn day. Yes, they're being driven to distraction. They're tired of it. They're feeling deflated. Like they're in a rut.
Come on. Just get on with it.
All right, settle down. On more or less the same continent-ish, we learned that Thai police had either mounted an ingenious undercover operation or merely sought to liven up an otherwise routine arrest to enhance station morale, give everyone a fun story to tell at a Christmas party, whatever. Hard to say. We learned that Bangkok's finest had determined, for reasons somewhat opaque to us at time of broadcast, that the best means of apprehending a particular miscreant was to join a parade commemorating Lunar New Year festivities, and while actually wearing one of the feline-themed costumes in which revellers suit up on such occasions. Claw enforcement, is that anything? We learned, however, that the unorthodox approach had worked, which I'm sure we can agree is the main thing.
For Christ's sake.
And that the streets of Bangkok had been safe-ened, if that even is a word.
It isn't.
To the tune of one ne'er-do-well. Seriously, do you know when this guy ever did well?
Ne'er!
Quite right. We just have to hope he doesn't try lion under oath. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
An exhausting dispatch of what we learned, courtesy of Andrew Muller there. You're listening to Monocle Radio.
IQ, EQ, and AI. 3 components key to the craft of innovation at UBS. Because to stay ahead in a rapidly evolving age, you need a partner with decades of experience, endless passion for the work, and a finger on the pulse of leading technologies, bridging human expertise with artificial intelligence, all to elevate you. UBS, banking is our craft.
.43 here in London, a roundup of the latest fashion news. We can cross to Cyprus to join Natalie Theodosi, Monocle's fashion director. Good morning, Natalie. How are you doing and how's Cyprus looking?
Good morning, Emma. It's so nice to hear your voice again. Cyprus is sunny and quite calm. It's a nice morning.
Good. Off we go. Right. So you've not been travelling, but there's been quite a lot of movement in fashion in the last couple of weeks, not least because we've got Milan Fashion Week, and we will talk about that and we'll talk about what happened at Fendi. But first, at the moment, we have Ramadan, and it is playing a really important part in fashion.
Absolutely. It's something that started almost a decade ago. Brands which were expanding, especially in the GCC, starting with Dubai, started recognizing Ramadan as an opportunity. And the way they first approached it was with Ramadan capsule collections. They then started experimenting with hosting iftar meals, which is when people break their fasts at sunset. But that does feel quite surface level, and that's what people have been saying. And also there had been quite a bit of saturation. There were way too many events, the same type of events happening around the month of Ramadan. So I think now the brands are thinking that they need to find more meaningful ways to engage with people during the month of Ramadan, especially as the GCC especially has surpassed the US and China in terms of performance. It's such a strong market. So this is a time to really engage with customers in more subtle ways, I think, that don't necessarily have to do with selling product, and to show them that they respect their culture.
And how do they go about doing that? Because as you've said, for such a long time, it's been a sort of a self-contained capsule moment actually for niche luxury, but it needs to have much more cultural sensitivity.
I think it's rethinking how you host the events. I think it's also people tend to shift their time schedules. So it's about accommodating to the way they live during that month, and also focusing the capsules and the celebration towards the end of the month where people are preparing for Eid. And also the campaigns that are being shot around that time should involve local talent and celebrate really the local religion and culture. And interestingly, speaking to some people that own local agencies and work with the Western brands that are trying to come in and take advantage of the moment, they've been saying that actually mid-price and high street brands have been doing it much better, and they're engaging with local talent and doing more innovative campaigns. So I think luxury brands should look at what Nike is doing, what the high street is doing, and get some ideas.
Let's head to Milan Fashion Week. The great debut, or all eyes are on the debut of Maria Grazia Chiuri at Fendi. She was the woman who brought Dior into its status as, you know, one of the great. I think it's a $9 billion powerhouse. She left last year. She's taken up the helm at Fendi. What was the verdict on her first show?
Just like with Dior, it's quite a divisive one. I've always been a fan of her work and everything that she achieved at Dior. With Fendi, I'm still not quite sure. I think we need to see a few more collections. It was a collection that felt like a palette cleanser. It was very commercially savvy. You could see some great accessories, but it was quite minimal, all dark tones. So I think we need to see more. What was interesting, though, is to see how she's already starting to experiment and play with fur, which is Fendi's biggest signature, and where they really have artisan expertise as well. And she's already bringing artists in and introducing new services like bringing your vintage fur to be reworked at the Fendi Atelier. So I think it's just the beginning. It wasn't a kind of breathtaking debut, I would say, but there's a lot of potential there.
No, I'd absolutely agree. I mean, some very, very beautiful pieces, very pared down, some lovely monochrome. But she has always come along with the idea of saying she is a woman's designer. Was there any sense of that?
I think so. There's always that in her work, whether you see the women artists that she's bringing on to collaborate, sometimes printing their text or their artwork on accessories, but also you always get the sense that women are able to move really freely in her clothes every time you see one of her shows. And she kept referring to silhouette for her Fendi debut, that she wanted to create clean lines and pieces that women can move in.
Speaking of sort of good pieces for women, tell us about the effect of Carolyn Bessette Kennedy. I think someone rather cynically said, every woman believes she dresses like Carolyn Bessette Kennedy.
Yeah. And it's interesting that every woman might think that she dresses like Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, and it's such a minimal look that she's known for. But I don't think anyone has had so much influence on fashion, maybe aside from Princess Diana. And now it's reaching quite a crescendo, but it's been a few years that she's been on every designer's mood board. People are referencing her looks and trying to recreate them. But now it's getting even bigger with the release of the series Love Story. And it's interesting to see the direct effect on brands. Like now everybody's searching for a Prada 90s bag. Everyone is looking for Calvin Klein. And there's an independent New York eyewear brand where she used to get her sunglasses made called Selima, and they cannot keep up with the orders that are coming in. So there's a lot of opportunities, but hopefully with brands will be smart in the way they're handling it, and so that they don't reach a point of saturation too quickly.
Natalie Theodosi in Cyprus, thank you so much for joining us on Monocle Radio. Now, music is something that most airlines use to help soothe your soul as you board and disembark. A Blast of the Blue Danube has been a well-worn soundtrack, for example, to fighting your way to your seat on an Austrian Airlines aircraft. Well, instead of going for a more obvious option, such as giving you a few bars of Sibelius's Finlandia or even a dollop of extreme death metal, Finland's national carrier Finnair has created an entirely new soundscape. It's composed by the celebrated Finnish composer Lauri Pora, which will accompany its passengers from gate to disembarkation. Well, Monocle's Helsinki correspondent Petri Bertsov was given a sneak peek of the 45-minute soundscape, and he sent us this report.
We know what most airlines look like. After all, each has its own livery, staff uniforms, brand logos and colors. But what does an airline sound like is an altogether more difficult question. The music you're hearing in the background is what Finnair will sound like. Its new sonic identity is original, composed specifically for the airline by Lauri Pora, a famed Finnish musician and composer known for his orchestral scores. Pora tells me the soundscape was written with the psychology of travel in mind and that he drew on his own memories as a passenger for inspiration.
And of course I have a lot of memories from Finnair, starting from the first flight in my life of being really excited, and then going on family holidays, and later becoming a business passenger, and just wanting to get to the meeting and back, and this sort of just trying to take from all these different situations of different kind of travelers and create something universal that would, I guess, one of the main things you want to achieve with sound is that people get comfortable and relaxed to the flight, and also I think on this one, and what Finnair has been working also, is to have a more unique Finnish sound, concentrate also on Finnish happiness and this sort of thing, because there's a lot of good music you can hear everywhere, and one thing that we talked about a lot, that this would be music specifically for Finnair, that this is something that only Finnair can play on their planes, so using traditional instruments and taking inspiration from Finnish and Nordic things.
Pora's challenge was to write something universal, music that could speak to nervous first-time flyers, seasoned business travelers, and families heading on holiday, all sitting within the same cabin. And crucially, given Finnair's status as the national carrier, the music had to feel and sound Finnish. Pora turned to nature for inspiration and used traditional instruments.
Using some traditional instruments like kantele and jouhikko and certain kind of symphonic orchestra sound. I mean, in the end, music is abstract, and whatever claims can be made with it. So I also think that I thought about Finnishness when I was doing it, but if somebody hears something else, then they have right to do so.
The finished work is substantial. 12 tracks, around 45 minutes of music, structured almost like a travel narrative, from anticipation to calm, from ascent to reflection. Different parts of the soundscape will be used during boarding, safety demonstration, landing and taxiing. It will gradually find its way into Finnair's lounges, even its customer service. Curated playlists are common in aviation, but a commissioned soundscape that follows the passenger from gate to arrival marks a shift. We know that much like light or scent, sound shapes our behavior, often subconsciously. Simon Large, Finnair's chief customer officer, believes airlines are just starting to explore audio's potential.
One of the components of the brand is that always should be thought about, certainly in terms of customer experience, we believe is sound. And it's often underappreciated, I think, in terms of customer experience design, but it can be enormously influential in terms of how it makes people feel.
For Finnair, the brief was both psychological and aesthetic. Large says the soundscape had to reflect national identity, reduce anxiety, and preserve flying's sense of wonder.
There are 3 dimensions to it that I think are quite important for us. The first is it's important to I think, sound authentic to where your brand comes from. And in this case, we wanted to be authentic to Finland. I think the second role that sound plays in an in-flight experience is for everybody, but one we think about is as a way of calming people, because anxiety can still be a big part of flying, and sound always has a role to play there, I think, in reassuring, calming, providing a sense of peace. And then I think the third element is also how do we inspire people? How do we continue to make travel a sense of wonder in a way? And I think, again, sound has a big role to play there and should be thought about in that context.
That balance between calm and curiosity is particularly relevant in long-haul travel, where Finnair has built its reputation connecting Europe and Asia via Helsinki. Passengers may spend 10 hours or more inside the airline's cabins. The sensory environment therefore matters. Flying still causes anxiety for many. Airlines say music can help. It slows breathing, steadies the heart, and eases boarding and descent. For Finnair, it also signifies home. Large recalls Finnish colleagues' reactions to hearing the music for the first time.
I could see immediately that it was evoking a much deeper emotion with them. Clearly there is within the music itself notes or tunes or assemblies of notes that strike very deeply in the Finnish core here in the way he's composed this. And then I thought, well, this is what we wanted. This is what we're trying to evoke. We want something that will generate deep emotion amongst our Finnish customers, but also something that's clearly Finnish, but also something that will make others curious who are not from Finland. And I think it does all of those things.
Translating national identity into sound is delicate work that risks turning into caricature. With Finnair's soundscape, Borra embedded Finnishness into the structure of music, tonal space, pacing, instruments, resulting in a music that feels calm and reflected, recalling the Nordic landscape. This soundscape forms part of a broader redesign spanning lighting that evokes northern skies and materials drawn from Finnish forests. The goal for Finnair is coherence, an unmistakably Finnish journey from gate to landing. Sound may linger in memory long after a flight. While most passengers may not know the composer's name, they sense if the space feels calm, tense, anonymous, or distinct. Finnair bets that sound will make the difference. For Monocle in Helsinki, I'm Petri Burtsov.
And that's all the time we have for today's programme. The warmest of thanks to all my guests and to the producers, Angelica Jobson, Carlotta Rebello and Anita Riotta. Our researcher was Annalise Maynard and our studio manager was Christy O'Grady. After the headlines, there's more music on the way. The briefing's live at midday here in London. The Globalist is back at the same time on Monday. But for now, from me, Emma Nelson, goodbye. Thank you for listening. Have a great weekend.